we are very proud to announce UMP Trading is an official partner with a proven profit track record.
Yeah, if you want great returns on your investments, be sure to check out UMP Trading.
Hello everyone and welcome back to American Ultras Talk. Today I'm here by myself because unfortunately Yuri couldn't make it. We just so decided it'd be good to get a video out for you guys about the November roster for our games against Trinidad and Tobago in the Nations League quarterfinals. Despite it being a few days late, we do apologize for that, but let's just jump straight into it and we'll start with the goalkeepers. Now we do have 3 because CONCACAF does require you to have 3 in the squad for the games. Last camp we only brought Turner and Horvath, and for this camp we add on Slanina. Basically the only other option was Drake Callender, who has been preferred to Slanina in the past. I think what happened here was Slanina was probably originally intended to be in the Olympic group because we do have a camp this coming week for the Olympic team. The second one, you guys might remember last month we had the first one playing Mexico and Japan. This time we're playing Iraq and Morocco. But clubs don't have to release players for those because it's not part of the FIFA international window. So I'm guessing UPenn didn't decide to release him for that. So we just decided to bring him in with the first team. So I'm glad he's here. It's nice to get him integrated with the squad a little bit because he should be our third choice keeper, maybe even second choice, depending on how Horvath does in January, sorting out a move, because he will be moving on in January from Nottingham Forest. But if he doesn't get a good enough move, Slanina could take his backup spot. And honestly, it's a little too early for this, but the way Turner's been looking at Nottingham Forest as well, Slanina could be in for a starting role sooner than we would have originally thought. But I like these goalkeepers. They're the best 3 we have available to us. Only Turner's going to play, obviously, because they are must-win games, but it's good to just have a consistent group. Speaking of consistent groups, we move on to the defenders, and it's completely unchanged. For the fullbacks, we have Serginho Dest and Joe Scally on the right, and Jedi Robinson and Christopher Lund on the left, with the center backs being Cameron Carter-Vickers, Tim Ream, Chris Richards, and Miles Robinson. Completely unchanged from the last camp, I think the last 2 camps actually, and I'm a big fan of this. There isn't really anyone for the fullbacks, at least, that I would have brought in. There's a couple left backs that some people might prefer to Lund, like John Tolkien, Jonathan Gomez, Caleb Wiley, but I think it's best to keep them with the Olympic squad, and I'm a big fan of Lund. I think he can potentially even challenge Jedi eventually for the #1 spot, so I'm really glad that he continues to be part of this group. For the right backs, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Some people have been saying Dest might play on the wing, and maybe a 3-5-2, maybe even just right wing in general in like a 4-3-3 because of the absence of Tim Weah, which we'll get into a little bit later on in the video, but the fullbacks basically pick themselves. The center backs, I do kind of have an issue here. I like that it's consistent to the rest of the group camps we've had because it's the same group that we've had for a couple of months now, and it's not good to change something, especially in the back line when you do have must-win games. But at the same time, Miles Robinson shouldn't have been there in the first place. It should have been Mark McKenzie or Austin Trusty that's in this group, integrated in fully, and we gotta blame Greg for that. I know his rosters have been a lot better since he got rehired than in his first stint, but we do still have to jump onto the mistakes that he does make because realistically, McKenzie and Trusty are both miles clear, pun intended, of Miles Robinson, and I think they'd definitely be better, and especially for Trusty, a left-footed center back who is potentially going to be our Ream replacement down the line. I think it makes sense to integrate him into the group as quickly as we can with the Copa America coming up, because the way that Ream's been declining this season, he might not even be good enough for the Copa America. So I think Trusty needs to be in this group sooner rather than later, but that's a problem for next camp now as we move on into the midfielders. And we have a very stacked midfield because of the lack of forward options, I think. We got Johnny Cardoso, Luca Della Torre, Leonard Maloney, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, Gio Reyna, Malik Tillman, and a first A-team inclusion for Paxton Aronson. He did get a call-up in one of the Camp Cupcakes last year, but that doesn't really count. This is his first inclusion with the A-team. He was very impressive with the Olympic team the last window, and it made sense to call him up to the A-team with some of the absences that we have. I do think it's a possibility that he might not play at all, because we do have 24 players in this roster. I'm pretty sure you're only allowed 23 in the matchday squad, and given that 3 of them have to be keepers, in the past we've excluded a keeper from that squad, whether it's Drake Callender, Josh Cohen, one of them in past camps this year. But since all 3 of them will have to be there, I think it'll be one of these midfielders, and it makes the most sense for Paxton. But regardless, it's good for him to be training with the first team, interacting with the first team, getting integrated into the group, because I do think he has a role in this Copa America team in 2024, and definitely a role in the World Cup in 2026. So I like that he's getting a chance. He's definitely earned it. In his few minutes for Frankfurt this season, he's been very, very good and impactful. So I just love to see him getting a chance, and it's nice to see him with his brother linking up for the USMNT for the first time ever. So that's a nice little bonus. As for the rest of midfielders, it's pretty standard. It'll be interesting to see if Reyna, like we talked about for Dest, plays out on the right-hand side. He is listed as a midfielder, which is a good sign, because personally I don't think he should be on the right wing, regardless of the options that we have or the lack of options, because I just think he's best at cam, and I don't want to see Greg resort back to playing him at wing, even though Way is out. I think we'd be better with him in the middle, even though Malik Tillman is a suitable option, and even Paxton as well. But I think the Reyna, McKennie, Musa midfield should be continued to be preferred. I wouldn't mind seeing Johnny given a chance in one of the games, maybe Maloney or Luca as well. Honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing Paxton getting a start if we're up big after the first leg. But with these being must-win games, it makes sense to go with the first team. I like these midfielders. It's first choice, and there's no notable omissions here. As we move on to the forwards now, the final spots, and not too many. Only 3 wingers and 2 strikers. It's Brendan Aronson, Fuller and Balogun, Kevin Paredes, Ricardo Pepi, and Alejandro Zendejas. And I think it's a pretty straightforward group. The big question was, will Luca Kolyasho be included in this? Because, like I've mentioned in previous videos, this would have been the perfect time for him to finally commit to us and pick the US, because I think he would have jumped in and been an immediate starter with this team, especially with Pulisic and Weah both being out due to injury, which is a bit of a concern. I think he would have taken his chance really well, because the starters for the wing are kind of up in the air. Most people are anticipating it could be Aronson and Zendejas just due to seniority. Personally, I think Paredes should start on the left with Aronson on the right, but we'll see what Greg does. In the end, it shouldn't really matter. We beat this Trinidad and Tobago team 6-1 with our B team, maybe even C team. Some people would argue D team in the Gold Cup. So with our A team, it should be a very similar story, regardless of Zendejas being there, who was the worst player on that Gold Cup roster, in my opinion. But yeah, I think the forwards are pretty straightforward. Now let's just jump into the formation a little bit and look at how Greg might line us up. So like I said, it's a pretty straightforward roster when it comes to the players, and I think that's good. We should be continuing to expect the best roster selection now, because Greg has shown in his second stint that he is capable of doing that. I know in his first stint we had a lot of MLS lifers, and that was kind of becoming the norm, but it's good that the new regular is the best possible roster. But as terms of how we're going to line up, it's a bit of an interesting one. With the injuries, this could be the perfect time to experiment with a new formation. I've seen a lot of people wanting a 3-5-2. I think it could be a little interesting how that would look. I'm not sure about having 3 center backs, because the center backs are probably the weakest part of this roster for me, and I don't really trust any of them in a back 3, to be completely honest with you. I think maybe, yeah, I don't know. I don't really trust any of them in a back 3. I think Leonard Maloney could potentially fill in there and take one of the center back spots, because he is a CDM now, converted from a center back, but he does still show a lot of center back tendencies in his game, and I think he'd do a job there if he filled in and took one of the spots, because I don't know how much I really trust CCV, still sort of recovering from injury, or Miles Robinson. He's always been decent for the national team, but we know his quality is not too great, and Riemann Richards have been declining this season, so I'm not sure about a 3-back system. I like the 4-2-3-1 that we've been going with. I know the wingers would be a little bit weak, and a 3-5-2 would allow us to have our 2 strikers, Balogun and Pepi, who have both been in very decent form this season, and are 2 of the best players on the roster, especially with Pulisic and Weah out. Having them both in at the same time is definitely worth it considering, but I'm not sure about Jedi and Dest as wingbacks. I think Dest would do a really good job, honestly. Jedi, I think he'd be all right, but against higher level oppositions, I'm not sure about the prospect of the 3-5-2. It would be nice to have a second formation to adapt to if things are going wrong, but at the same time, I think we should just stick to what's working. A 4-2-3-1 hasn't failed us yet, and with that double pivot of Musa and McKennie, with Reyna at the 10, it should be more than enough to take on Trinidad and Tobago, even with the likes of Brendan Aronson, Kevin Paredes, Alex Andejas out on the wings as opposed to Dest or Jedi, because in that 3-5-2, we don't really have much skill on the wing. Dest is very technical, but Jedi is one of the least technical players in the roster. I think it's fair to say. I'd rather see Christopher Loon there, honestly, if we were going to play a 3-5-2, because he's a lot more technical, better at crossing, and just I think he's just more suited to that position than Jedi is. I think Jedi suits a back four more, and I know he does get forward a lot, but I think his end product is a lot worse than Lund. So that's my thoughts on the formation. Let me know in the comments, guys. What do you think about this roster? Any notable omissions? For me, it's McKenzie or Trusty over Miles, but that's really the only one I'm too upset about. Let me know if you're upset about Pulisic not being here. For me, it's a win because I don't want him to risk re-injury. We saw him thrust back into the action with Milan and almost get a very serious re-injury against PSG midweek, which was very scary. So I'm glad he's getting a rest for 2 games that are very winnable, regardless of the situation. I mean, these are must-win games, like I've said, but they're very winnable games against an inferior opponent. We should be able to do just fine without Pulisic and Weah, and obviously Tyler Adams as well. But let us know in the comments, what do you think of the roster? And what do you think of our chances to win? I think it's pretty solid. Let us know score predictions, and let us know what you think about the formation, because I think it's an interesting debate. 3-5-2 versus 4-2-3-1. Should we experiment? Should we stick to what's working? Let us know. But thank you guys all for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're new, and if you enjoyed the content, comment down below like we said, and I'll see you next time.